Welcome to the early show with your sad, very sad procrastinator of a host, Michael Lopergola. Well, as you can see, I finished my last 5-hour energy for the evening, which means that I have about this many hours left to finish my project for class. Today's topic: Restoration Era Theater. I moved. Play is the Restoration comedy School for Scandal by Richard Sheridan. And in order to convey a perfect picture of this wonderful, wonderful piece of theater, I'm going to show you the history of the theater during the Restoration Era, the history of England during the Restoration Era, the history of the playwright during the Restoration Era, and then the play itself. And then for fun, I might just show you a scene from it, starring me, Michael Lopergola. Okay, well, there's no better place to start than the beginning, and nothing says exciting opening more than puritanical England, so why don't we just dive on in there? So in 1660, following 18 years of puritanical rule, England's monarchy had finally been restored, thus restoring the exiled King Charles II to his rightful throne, therefore ushering in an era known as... Anybody? Anybody out here? That's right, Joey. The Restoration Era. Now, with puritanical rule no longer an issue, this allowed for things like sports, music, dancing, and theater to return to the public eye of England. Culturally, this era provided a major change in the arts, most notably literature. Most literature of the time was often written for the advancement of knowledge, a topic which was often presented with the theme of human nature. Rather than approach such themes seriously, they chose to satirize the work instead. Because Restoration plays were much more light in nature, changes had to be made to pre-existing plays such as Shakespeare in order to make them more happier and more approachable to a contemporary audience. These changes included singing witches in Macbeth, and a Romeo and Juliet ending where Romeo and Juliet do not die. But probably one of the biggest milestones made during this era was the inclusion of female actors in English theater. And it is with all these components put together that formed the gem of Restoration theater, the Restoration comedy. And of all the Restoration comedies, Richard Brimsley Sheridan's The School for Scandal is one of the most famous. Oh, I'm sorry, you don't know what School for Scandal is? Well, don't worry, because I'm going to tell you. The story focuses on that of a noble bachelor by the name of Sir Peter Teazle and his newlywed Lady Teazle as they occupy this society full of malicious, mean gossipers, and the cruelest of them all is a woman by the name of Lady Sneerwell. Subtle. And Lady Sneerwell essentially takes on this form of a female Iago, as she attempts to get what she wants through lies and letters written by her forger named Snake. Again, subtle. And throughout the entire story, her goal is to break up this relationship between a man named Charles Surface and Sir Peter's ward named Maria, in hopes of getting Charles for herself. But in order to do this, she gets the help of a man named Joseph, who is Charles's brother. And this guy is very hypocritical. He's the exact opposite of his brother Charles. And Joseph has this eye on the fortune that will one day come to Maria, and he hopes to marry her in order to get the money. And then while all this is happening, Joseph has tricked Sir Peter into wanting him to marry Maria. It's very convincing, evidently. And Maria isn't having any of this. She's like, no, I don't want you, I want Charles. And then, as if out of nowhere, Charles's Uncle Oliver shows up from Australia. And he's all like, oh, I've been hearing all these rumors about my nephews. He's doing this, he's doing that, but they don't seem to make sense. So I'm going to do the only thing that makes sense. Disguise himself as a moneylender. And then he goes to this auction where Charles is at, and he ends up buying all of his own family portraits, which blows my mind, because that's like me going into my own house and buying my own stuff. And then after this conversation he has with Charles, he realizes, oh, Charles isn't a bad guy. He actually is a very caring, decent person who cares about the poor. But when he goes to Joseph, again, disguised as a poor person, he realizes that Joseph is actually not a nice guy at all, and he's actually kind of a jerk. Meanwhile, Gossip has linked Lady Teasle to an affair with Charles, but in reality, she's having an affair with Joseph. Eventually, Peter hears about these things, and he goes to Joseph's apartment for advice, only to find that Lady Teasle is there with Joseph, but he doesn't know that she's Lady Teasle yet. He thinks that she's some girl that Joseph's trying to do. And then Lady Teasle hides, and then Joseph hides because Charles shows up all of a sudden. And Charles basically ruins everything for Joseph and reveals the whole thing to be all messed up, and then that Joseph's the actual jerk, and then they all jump out of the closets and stuff, and it's like a big fanfare, hurrah, hurrah. Now here's where it really gets weird. Lady Teasle reveals that she wasn't really having an affair, but that she was actually pretending to have an affair because it was fashionable. And then Peter forgives her, and they're all making out, and it's cute, yay for them. And then Oliver shows up, and he reveals that Lady Sneerwell and Snake were all behind all the trouble all along, and she's like, curse is foiled again, and it's like, yay, love, and whatever. And then Peter's like, you know what? I'm okay with Charles marrying Maria, and everyone's like, oh, hooray, everything worked out, yay, and it's all good. And that, right there, is School for Scandal. So, thank you. Oh, and Richard Brinsley Sheridan was born in 1751. His mother was a playwright. His father was an actor-manager. And his first play was called Rivals, and it did horrible its opening night. Then he changed the cast and did really well the second night. School for Scandal was his second play. He did it 2 years later, and it was really popular. And it's probably his most famous work.